Let's hit it. And welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort. All right, here we go. What you think about, you will bring about. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and keep your fingers crossed because technology has been a little hanky for us, so we're hoping things will be just fine here. Before I introduce our guest today, I always like to go ahead and do a few shout-outs. So first, if you liked our opening music, it's called Clarion Call by the Mark Arneson Band. And they are just so wonderful. You can download that on any of your favorite music platforms. So please feel free to go ahead and do that anytime. And then for those of you that are new, you might not know what we're all about. Basically, I am a daughter whose mom had dementia for 30 years. And so I created Alzheimer's Speaks to connect people to services and products and tools around the world. So Alzheimer's Speaks likes to raise all voices, big and small, all over the world. Like I said, from those diagnosed to family and friends to advocates and researchers and a wide variety of businesses and so forth. So please feel free if you think you've got a story to share. Reach out to me at radio@alzheimersspeaks.com. I would love to talk with you. Now, coming up on Wednesday, I'm actually going to be doing a program which will be virtual so anybody can attend, and that is sponsored by Artist Senior Living, and it's called As the Cookie Crumbles. And I'm just going to be sharing about my own experience with my own mom and the lessons that I learned during that period of time. And that is from 5:30 to 6:30, Wednesday the 20th. And you can register by calling 312-423-1514. And then mark your calendars also for May 12th because Central Minnesota Dementia Community Action Network is going to be having Dale Brennison speak, and that is free for anyone to attend virtually, or you can meet in person as well. And you can go and check them out. You can find out more information through Dementia Map. And if you're not familiar with Dementia Map, it is a collaboration between myself and Dave Wiedrich, who is the founder of the Memory Cafe directories for 5 different countries. There you can search over 150 different categories. So we're building out every day. And so please check it out. It's free to use. You don't have to give any personal information out. And if you are someone who has resources, products, or tools and want to be listed, please contact me or just go to Dementia Map. You can find more information there as well. And then I'm big into support. And so, I do a couple of support groups every month. Arthur Senior Care sponsors Arthur's Memory Cafe, which we've been doing, for about 10 years now. And we meet the second and the fourth Wednesday of the month at 1 o'clock Central, and that is virtual. And then also Brookdale North Oaks is sponsoring a Caregiver Connect, which also has respite for their loved ones with dementia. And that is the last Wednesday of each month at 10 a.m. Central. Right now we are doing that virtually, but we hope in May we will be back and in sync. And then exciting news for you out there who are doing some cool things in the dementia field. If you have something you're really proud of, apply for Maud's Awards, because if you're an individual, you can win up to $5,000. If you're a company, up to $25,000. And that is for work that you've already done. And they also have another venture called Maud's Ventures, And that you can win $50,000 to $100,000. And that's kind of a percolator to get some seed money going for something dementia specific. They have 3 different challenges. You can go to modsventures.org or modsawards.org for information on both of those. I do want to just let us hear from the Alz authors, and then we're going to be right back with our guest, and we're going to be talking about the Daughterhood, which is the podcast for caregivers.
Hello, podcast listener. If you're caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia, you'll want to check out Alz Authors, the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience. We have the most comprehensive collection of hundreds of carefully vetted books and blogs covering all types of dementia and caring situations. Our authors' personal stories and painfully learned lessons can help you on your own journey. We also offer a fabulous podcast called Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, which you can find on any of your podcast platforms. Remember, you are not alone. One can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony. Find us at alzauthors.com.
Well, we are back, and I can't wait to introduce our guest today. Rosanne Corcoran cared for her mother for over 12 years, which is a long time. And she started, as she says, as a stealth caregiver to a full-time caregiver, and then to an in-home sandwich caregiver for her mother the final 6 years. She created Daughterhood, the podcast for caregivers, after experiencing firsthand the stress and isolation that caregiving can bring, along with the lack of meaningful resources for care partners. And so the podcast itself really cultivates a dynamic group of subject matter experts and helps listeners navigate uncharted waters. And I'm just thrilled to have you with us. So welcome, Rosanne. How are you doing today?
I'm okay, Lori. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor.
Well, good. I was a little nervous because I had put you on mute, and I was praying to God that it was going to unmute because we had a little technical difficulties earlier here. And so my heart was pumping.
Okay.
My heart was pumping a little fast, going, "Okay, please work." So I'm sure all of our listeners can appreciate those technical difficulties, and we were down to about a minute and a half, and I said, okay, I'm going to reboot my computer. We're going to try this all over again and see if we can get this thing to work.
Well, it's the beauty of going live, isn't it, Lori?
Yeah.
It's the beauty of going live. Yeah,
well,
it's okay. It's all good.
It's just that thing. It's kind of like with caregiving. You know, you got to punt, and you pray a lot, and you got to punt, and then look for an alternative if that doesn't work. So, well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I always start out asking everyone if they have been personally touched by dementia in their family or circle of friends, and if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us.
No, absolutely. My mother was one of 13 siblings, and 9 of them had some sort of dementia. So I have been around dementia for a very long time. My mother was the second youngest of all of her siblings, and I was the youngest of my siblings. So I came in very late to the party, as I was a change of life baby for my mom. And so I've witnessed a lot of not only caregiving, but the process of caregiving and the process of disease, really. So because along with dementia, there were other health issues as well. So that I could always see. I always felt like I could hear the train whistle at some point. You know, it was over there in the future. So when she had said to me when she was 80, I think my memory's changing. I thought, well, thank God. I don't have to bring this up. Do you know,
Mm-hmm.
Lori, like, okay, great, we can talk about this and we can go forward. And it was, and I felt a little relieved. But that was very short-lived because then we never went back to it really. Like I bought one of those books that had like fill in the blanks to test
Mm-hmm.
to see where you're at memory-wise. And she was like, I don't need that. And I thought, oh no, like, did the window close that quickly? What happened? So I didn't have that chance to have that conversation and that's that anosognosia that we all hear about and is so frustrating, where there's not that recognition that there's a problem then. So then I thought, well, okay, we'll go to the doctor, and the doctor will help us, and we'll be on the right path, and everything, I'll have a handle. It'll be different because I will have a handle on this, is what I thought. And that didn't happen because, as you know, doctors aren't the best at being forthcoming or at being at wanting to say something that is detrimental, like a dementia diagnosis. So that's why, for what I say is self-caregiving, is I watched and I waited and I tried to do things to support her while she remained independent. And it was basically a waiting game, really, unfortunately, until something happened. And she had fallen and fractured her hip. And we were at a different hospital from the regular system. And the doctor wrote down mild cognitive impairment. And I thought, oh, my God, this is great. I have something, right? People are going to pay attention to this. Okay, great. And when we went back to her regular doctor, she was like, nah, she's fine. That's just aging. It's fine. And I thought, no, this isn't just aging. Like, you should know better than this. I know better than you're the doctor. So it was almost like a comedy of errors, in that her doctors were not forthcoming and they didn't want to say anything. Now, I should say my mother was very independent, and she always looked 20 years younger than she was. So for them, it was, well, she looks great. Yes, I know she does, but she's not eating. She tells me she ate. She doesn't eat. We're buying the same things at the store all the time. She's not as social as she was. And, of course, what happens in that realm, too, is that people around you start dying. And so my mother was a ballroom dancer, and her partner died. So, of course, she wasn't going to be out because she didn't have a partner, but it was more than that. And that's what I was trying to say to them. Like, it's different. She's withdrawing from people. And it still didn't matter, Lori. And that's part of the frustration. When you're trying to deal with these doctors and you're trying to tell them what's happening, and it's like, no. And I've come to find out it's because, there's no business model, right? Every disease needs a business model. And unfortunately, there just isn't one for dementia. So I just kept on plugging and tried to do the best I could. And a few years before she moved in with us, I would drop my daughter off at school and drive down to my mother's and wait for her to wake up, and then I would spend the day there until I had to leave to go pick my daughter back up from school. And then I would call another 3 to 4 times through the night until it was time for bed. I labeled all her electronic devices so that when she would call and say she didn't know how she got, like she was watching TV and she didn't know how she got from the program she was watching to something else. And I was able then to say, I took a picture of the device as well, so I could walk her through the steps to get her back on track. I was counting pills. I was, all of the things that we do as caregivers that people don't realize sometimes, I think. So that's what I was trying to do to support her. And then she had a few other issues. She had vertigo. She had a vasovagal syndrome where she would pass out if she got hot, where she had pain. And she had passed out one time, and I honestly, I went down, I scooped her up, and I brought her to my house. And that's where she stayed. And that's how I got her here, because I would have never been able to get her out of her apartment because of that independent streak, which is great. And I supported that. And it was important to her to be independent. And I tried to support that for as long as possible. And then when we were at that point, it was apparent that she needed that help. And I often say I got lucky, in quotes, that there was something that enabled me to bring her here.
Yeah, that actually was a gift, and I think part, when you were talking about the doctors too, is they don't really give out any support systems, at all,
no.
For people. I mean, most people are lucky if they get the Alzheimer's Association, and there's so many different organizations out there and individuals in groups that can assist people, but there's such a disconnect. And that's exactly why we created Dementia Map, was to try to help with that as well. And, you've developed your podcast, like I and so many others now are stepping up and going, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming, and it doesn't need to be this traumatic on everybody, all day long when you're trying to figure it out all by yourself. And it's so nice, to be able to know that there are others and that you aren't alone. Well, let's talk about when you created your podcast, what the heck were you thinking? What did you want to do with it?
Well, for the first 3 years when I was caring for my mom, it was a patchwork of coverage, right? Because I do have siblings, but they are much older, and I was trying to find that balance of, I had kids. I have kids at home. My one daughter was a senior in high school. My other one was an eighth grader. We had things all the time, and trying to get that help in was hard. And I finally, it took me 3 years to get an outside caregiver to come in and give me a little bit of respite, right, on a somewhat regular basis that I could control, and not I can do it if I'm available or I'm not available, and all of that. So with that, it gave me like a break, and I had found Daughterhood, the website, back in 2015 when I had first moved my mother in. I was like, this is great. And I thought, wow, this is great. Like support groups. Well, who the heck can go to a support group when you're caregiving? And I thought about, and I looked around, and I went on the Alzheimer's Association website, and they had support groups at night. And I thought, who's scheduling these for night? Like, are you kidding me? There's no dementia caregiver, Alzheimer's caregiver that's going out at night, in my mind. So when I got this caregiver in, I contacted Daughterhood and started a support group, and it was like in January of 2019. And I was meeting with these people, and we were all feeling the same thing, and we were all trying to slog through the same information. And it's interesting because I felt like a lot of times it was like finger wagging, like you have to take time for yourself and you've got to do this, and it's like, that's great, but I'm drowning here, and it's like trying to tell a drowning person to just kick harder and you'll be fine. It's like it doesn't work. So I approached Ann Tomlinson from Daughterhood, and I said, did you ever think about having a podcast? I would love to create this podcast. And in my mind, I knew I couldn't do it weekly. I couldn't do it bi-weekly. I mean, I was caregiving, right? But I thought if I did a monthly podcast, I could manage that. I'd be able to research. I'd be able to interview. I would, sit in my closet. It was nice and quiet, and I could interview people and bring that to, as the voice of all of the people that I'm sitting in the support group with, to ask these questions. To say, this is how it is. This is what I'm feeling, and we need help here. And to bring them with me when I spoke with those experts or content subject matters, or you know what I mean, to be able to bring that with me. And I thought, I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to give it a shot. It was what I was thinking. And when I thought about, okay, well, how do I do this in the midst, I could always hear my mother, because she was that person that would say, did you help somebody? Did you help that person today? And I thought, well, at the very least, that would be it. And at the end of each of these episodes, I wanted whoever was listening to be able to have gained some sort of insight into what they needed help with, or to have a plan, or something, a thought, or something that would help them make it another day or another hour. And if there wasn't that, then at least I wanted them to know that they had a friend, and that they weren't alone in how they were feeling, that somebody understood that they were doing this. And that's how this all started. And it's crazy to me because it was in the very midst of this. I mean, I'm talking to these experts as I'm talking to Judy Cornish about dementia behaviors, as my mother's, saying, I want to go home. You know, I'm talking to Tifa Snow about the importance of caregivers taking a break for themselves in the midst of literally drowning, and saying to her, but how do you do that? You know, I can't even take a shower. like I can't, you know, don't say go out and get a manicure and you'll feel better. I can't even take a shower. How do we do this? And her, you know, that we have to take these time or else we're going to drown as people. We're not going to be able to survive the caregiving experience. So it was, you know, my background's in communications, and I thought, okay, well, you know, I'll figure this out and we'll see what comes of it. And honestly, I'm fortunate that Anne did say, yeah, run with it. And I'm fortunate that people seem to like it, and I hear from them that it's been helpful to them, and that's really what I was hoping for at the end of the day, is just to make somebody, you know, feel that they weren't alone and that they had some help.
Well, and it's so funny when you say kind of that shaking finger at you, just, you know, slow down, take some time. It's like, you know, step in my shoes, please, you know,
yes.
or even when you mentioned about having some respite for yourself. I mean, I don't think there's anything more frustrating to someone who's giving care when someone says, oh, okay, I'll come over and, you know, I'll relieve you, you know, for 3 or 4 hours, and then all of a sudden they don't show. And you've rearranged your schedule, and you've gotten excited. If it's that you're just going to take a nap, or you're going to go get your hair cut, or you're going to go sit at the park. I mean, it doesn't really make any difference what you're doing. But then, to me, I found it just made me feel like I'm not asking anymore. I can't get excited for this, because now I just rearranged everything to accommodate this, and which complicated my life. But I know that I needed this. And then you let me down, you know, and I know you shouldn't look at it like being let down, but boy, that sure is how it feels.
Well, it does, and that's the other part of what people don't realize, is that the stress, the isolation, and the resentment grows from having to ask other people to help you, and then them saying, it's almost like they're deciding if they can or cannot. You know, like, we're the ones that are in these rooms, and that goes into that. It goes into all of that resentment of, okay, well, I'm here, I'm doing this, and you're over there deciding if you're going to rearrange your schedule for 2 hours so I can do X. And that adds to that resentment, and it's hard. And then you're right. It's like, you know what? Well, then forget it. I'm not even going to bother.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's you know, you got enough bumps in the road as it is, and detours, and that's a big one. That's a big one when it's really about self-care and sanity and things, and maybe just, you know, getting your own affairs in order, staying on top of your own stuff, which I know for a lot of people that slides. So, those are difficult times. You know, the term self-care, you know, you mentioned is kind of an awful term. What would you recommend we call it?
I have a burning hatred for self-care. It makes me irrationally angry, because the connotation is the massage or the manicure or the manicure, or take a trip. When you're caregiving, it's like, are you kidding? So I don't know if it's take some time for yourself. I don't know if it's carve out a little, because that's what it is. We're carving out these moments in our days, you know, and I can tell you, because I did have that help. I had that help for a whole year, Lori, and I almost felt like a regular person with that help. Now, mind you, I had a caregiver come in. I would still wake my mom up. I would still get her dressed. I'd still get breakfast. I still did everything. All the caregiver had to do was sit here to make sure that she was okay. That was it. Like, I did all the everything else. And I actually did feel like a person. I was able to think. I physically felt better, and I understood, okay, this is what they're all talking about. You have to have those moments. And then the pandemic hit. So it was like, for me, it was like, okay, get back in the box, because I couldn't have the caregiver come in anymore. I didn't know what the heck was going on. I was watching everything on, how things were moving across the world. I wasn't going out, and I didn't have anybody coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So then it just kind of exploded. So then it actually became, okay, how are you going to survive this? Because there was no out, there was no break. And what I found was I started to do little things that I could do in my own house as a bridge to get me until I could go out again, which turned out to be, 9, 10, 11 months, however long that was. But it was little things that I could do. And the first thing I did was I gave myself a shouldectomy. I let go of anything I felt like I should do, right? I wasn't going to sit here and think, well, I should be doing this or I should be doing, no. And that was, in the world when the world was like, hey, we can clean closets, or look, we can clean out basements. We can do this. It was like, no, the caregivers, our worlds just got smaller. They got smaller and they got harder. So, and then I tried to, breathing helped because I don't breathe. I'm a shallow breather. I think caregivers don't breathe to begin with. I think we're always holding our breath. You know what I mean? And so I tried to concentrate on the kind of things that I could do in my house because there was no getting out of the house. And they were the kind of things that I tried to bring in. Like I found myself listening to celebrity memoirs on Audible. And you can get this at the library too. But when I couldn't take the clapping of Wheel of Fortune one more night, I would put in my earbuds and I would listen to that because it was almost like it transported me someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this isn't anything you can continue to do. Like you need to get out. You need to get out of your house. But in that type of a situation, it's like, okay, what can I do right here in this moment to provide something back to myself? And I'm a big journaler. What started out as journaling and writing down literally just my mother's symptoms and what was going on and what she was doing, that's how it started for me. So that I could, then go into her physicians and say, okay, so this is what I'm seeing. This is what's happening. And it morphed into my writing every day. And, even when I was writing with those, this is what's happening, this is what's going on, I would write myself little notes like, yes, Rosanne, you're seeing this and you're doing the best you can. Because I knew I would always think, well, I should have done this, right? Or I could have done that. Or what about that? And it was like, it's you're doing the best you can in the situation that you are in with the information that you have in this moment. And that's what I try to remember and keep in my mind. And I have stacks of journals now because it morphed into my writing about the day, writing about how I felt about the day, all of that. So it was something, it was an outlet, and it was a way to almost just get it out of my head. Because again, it just kind of sits there. But it's also where the support groups came in, because we started meeting on Zoom. Because again, we were all caregivers. Where were we going? So Zoom became a huge lifesaver for me for the entire length of the pandemic. And, when you're in these support groups, and I'm not a support group person, Lori, let me just say, I'm not, you come from an Italian family, it's La Familia, like you keep it in house and you deal with your own problems. But with support groups, to be able to go in there and actually say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, and have somebody else say, oh my God, I feel the same way. Because we can't say that to other people. Other people don't understand what goes into this caregiving, journey. And when you're talking with other people that understand what it's like to not have any sleep and be so stressed out of your head and not even know how you're making it through the day, it's that community that gets you through.
Yep, that's so true.
And it's
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was kind of anti-support group too, because it was like, I have no time. Are you nuts?
Right.
You're adding another thing onto my list for this person. I didn't even see it for myself. I saw it for my mom. And I'm like, I just can't squeeze another thing in. And, I am so low on the totem pole, I don't even register in terms of taking care of myself because I'm trying to keep everything else afloat, because it's not just the person, it's your whole life. It's your family, it's your kids, it's your work, it's your, whatever it might be, all those different roles we play. And you're right, people don't understand the heaviness of that. Even if you want to do it, it still is tremendous. When you talked about having somebody come into the house and you were still doing everything, but you felt lighter. And I think you felt lighter because you weren't alone. Even though you were
exactly it.
doing it, there is magic. I mean, it's like fairy dust when you don't feel alone. It really turns the tables. And I think that's where the different types of support gatherings that are out there, I don't even like to call them groups because to me, it's just too heavy. I like to gather with my friends. And people have such deep connections in these groups because they can be their authentic selves and state emotions and feelings that they wouldn't dare to somebody else because they wouldn't understand and they'd be looked down on. Well, you should never say that. You should never feel that. You should, and it's like, well, you want to switch roles for a week and then let's talk.
Exactly. And that's exactly it because, and I can't tell you how many people come to the circle and at the end of it, they say, boy, I can't tell you how much better I feel now. I'm so glad that I came because it is that community. And I start off every group by saying, listen, what's said here stays here. And there is no judgment here. There isn't because you get the people that can say there's some really hard things. And I always say that I can say I absolutely adore my mother. I love her. I will and have done anything for her. And this is really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those statements can exist in the exact same moment, and that's okay.
Yeah, and that's
it's
very
helpful
true. People
to go forward.
Yeah, it's very true that people don't realize that those two things can exist in the same space. You can love and hate something at the same time.
Right.
It's
absolutely.
You can be filled and drained at the same time, going through the process, and it's but having those connections to other people in. When people share, I mean, it's one of the best ways to learn and to, maybe avoid situations or take that situation instead of beating yourself up going, what's a lesson? There's a lesson in this and I need to share that lesson with my group,
Absolutely.
And working together on resolutions is a really, really beautiful thing.
Totally. And that's the other thing about the sharing of information, because let's be honest, you can find anything you want on the internet, right? You just Google, services near me and your zip code. You're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't help you disseminate it and make a plan out of it. It doesn't help you know the difference between this home care agency and that home care agency. It doesn't help you when you're trying to find a podiatrist to come to your house. And that's part of the sharing in that. My mom was a hairdresser, so she knew everything about everything in the area from talking to her customers.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always expanded on that. People will call me and say, do you know where yes, I do. Just go over here. Because it's information, but it's the delivery behind it, and it's the support behind it that makes that information come to life for you. Because then you actually have a real life person that says, yeah, I went there. It was great. And you're like, okay, well then let me try there. It's just helpful. It's just helpful all the way around.
Yeah, very, very, very much so. Let's talk a little bit about being an advocate, for care partners. What does that mean to you?
I could go on and on about the unjust and unsafe and plain just idiotic rules of not being allowed into the hospital or, with someone living with dementia through the pandemic. I mean, we've all witnessed what all of that looked like. And, you need to have someone to speak for you when you can't speak for yourself. You just do. I have a friend who always tells doctors about her mother that she's not just a lump of gray laying in that bed. She's my mother. She was this, she was that. She's a person. And they don't know that. They come in and your person that you're caring for, your care partner, is only words on a page. And you have to bring those words to life for them. And you have to be able to stand up for them. And, you know, I got pushed. I got a very quick education when my youngest had a very rare eye condition, like 50 in the world rare. And this was, you know, the internet wasn't really a thing. And I learned to help her in the best way I could because people didn't know. I had to be the expert. I had to learn what the condition was. I had to learn everything about it. How did it happen? How does it go? Where do we go from here? But to not only take that education, but to not be afraid to ask the questions and to point it out to the doctors. To not be afraid to say to the doctor, here's what's happening. What does this look like? Or tell me what the path looks like, or tell me what normally happens in these situations. We have to not be afraid of taking on that role. And I know that some people, it makes them uncomfortable, and I get that. I mean, you know, it's hard. But when you're in charge, it comes with great responsibility. And in dealing with all of that, there's so many things that are offshoots of that, because you're under so much pressure trying to be in that world. And I would always say to the doctor, listen, I'm not a doctor. You're the doctor. This is what I'm bringing to you, and I want to work with you in this case, because that's what it comes down to. You know, people would always say to me, are you a nurse? And I'm like, no, because when you start, I always call them magic words. You have to find the magic words to let the professional know that you know you've done your research. And then it changes the level, Lori. I mean, it changes the playing field, because then it's like, oh, okay, well then I'm going to have to spend a little more time with this one. This one knows what's happening. Do you know?
Yep. Oh, totally.
And I hate to say it like that, but that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, no, I experienced that too. And my folks would always refer to me as their nurse. And it was just hilarious. And even one time this is really funny, but my husband went in for a procedure, and the nurses set the doctor up to think that I was there to review him. He was a nervous wreck. And, you know, because my parents kept referring to me as this person and stuff, and you could just see his eyes were kind of darting and things. And finally I said, I don't know who you think I am, but I'm just their daughter. That's it. And I mean, he literally wiped, you know, a bead of sweat off his face because he was, you know,
my God,
he was
that's
very,
great.
very nervous. But, you know, it is, you have to let them know you're not going away and that you're going to stand up. Yep. I remember arguing with a dentist for an hour and a half who wanted to go in and pull all my mother's teeth because they were chipped and broken and she might get an infection. And I'm like, I'm not letting you pull her teeth and put dentures in. They're not going to end up in her mouth anyways, you know. And and she would know her teeth were pulled. And he's like, oh, she would never know. And I said, yes, she would. You don't know my mother. And he said, there's no way she would sense that. And I said, I know she knows. And he's like, well, how? And I said, because she used to like a peanut butter parfait until she thought the nuts were rocks. And then we switched to a blizzard. And that was fine until she thought there was sand in her malts. And then we ended up just going to McDonald's and getting a hot fudge sundae with no nuts. And he was like shocked that she could sense that. And I said, you have no idea how important her teeth were to her. And I said, no, you're not, you know, well, it won't cost you anything. This is not about cost. This is about comfort care and realizing who you're caring for. And, but the decisions sometimes I think are made in such a black and white fashion. And I mean, we're talking rainbow here. Everybody's a little bit different. And
Yes.
that needs to be taken into consideration. So when you're caring for somebody, you really need to know who they are and what brings them joy, what scares them, what do they want? How do they want to live? And I think more people have to ask themselves, how would they like to live? Do you want to be forced
Absolutely.
to do something that you're not comfortable with, that goes against the grain of your soul? There really are a lot of questions out there that people are in such denial that, oh my gosh, life could end, or somebody might get sick, and so we don't discuss them, and that's just foolish. It's just downright foolish.
Well, it is. It absolutely is, and it's because we don't like to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We don't like to have the uncomfortable conversations, and they need to be done because, surprise, there is an end to our lives, and that is, we're all heading in that direction. We have to have those conversations, and it's infuriating to me when doctors say things like, "Well, she'll never know." What? What do you mean she'll never know? Like, if you think just because she can no longer drive or she can no longer remember how to balance a checkbook, that she doesn't have feelings and emotions and understands intuitively what is happening, you are the one with the problem.
Yeah, plus and you just said it in front of her.
Yeah, exactly. It's infuriating and it's insulting. And that's the other part of this whole thing is the dignity. We have to, I don't understand how people can think that. I don't understand how people can think that inherently and intuitively that goes away. That never goes away. We know that it never goes away, Lori, right? And it's like, come on, everybody. It's time to turn that page. It's time to turn that page. But that goes back to education. And we have to be educated so we can educate others.
And people have kind of accepted. People have kind of accepted when someone's in a coma that they can still take everything in. But yet with somebody with dementia who's still walking around, or up in a wheelchair or whatever, they blow that. They just blow that away, and they don't give them eye contact. They don't include them in the conversation. It is really, really amazing. I had one man who was in my memory cafe, and we were doing a special on financial planners, and he said, I switched to financial planners because he would always bring his wife with, because he was the primary care partner, and she had to be with him, needless to say, and he would never look at her. He would never include her in the conversation, and he's just said, I'm not doing this. You are not a good fit for me. I am insulted in terms of how you are dealing with us. And he was angry. And that was a big account they lost, But
no, I'm sure it was, but good for him, because it's not right. Yeah. It's just not right. And I always say, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it where people think, they don't understand anything, and then say, oh, but they knew I was there when they were done. No, you can't have it both ways. You can't think that, exactly what you said, somebody's in a coma and can hear you, but yet you're going to ignore the person living with dementia. It does not, it's not acceptable. It's just not acceptable. Yeah. And that's all part of it.
It really is.
And I would also say, for advocates, the really important thing, I would always go in with I made a binder for my mother. It was just, I used to use my day timer back in the day. Lori, remember day timers when we used to write notes on paper?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Pagers.
Remember that?
Cell phones that were as
Pagers,
big as
all that.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep. Used to have the calendar in the day timer. Remember trying to squeeze all that? Yeah. So I would use a day timer. And then that morphed into a 3-ring binder. But I would go into every doctor's appointment with my mother with this binder, and I would write everything down. And when they would be looking for, I don't know where that blood test is, and I would flip, here it is. It was on blah, 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 and blah, 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 on this date, and this is what you ordered. And it makes them sit up a little straighter, because they're like, oh, boy, this one writes things down, because it's a record. And that part of it it's like I'm writing also. So when I call you on the phone and say her blood pressure is this over this, and we had this conversation in this office, I'm going to be able to refer back to it. But it's all of those steps that go into that advocacy, because it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop when you leave that office. You're still fighting for them.
Yeah. And not everybody's a note taker. I'm a note taker too, and things. But, so you've got to find out what works for you. But there are various systems. Some people, ask the doctor if they can record things. So that if they have a care team, that can be shared. Most of them don't like to be recorded. So everyone's worried
about the problem with the recording. Yeah.
Yep.
But you know how it is when you get out in the car and you go, wait, did he say take that twice a day, or is that for a week, or was that for 10 days? Like that's why I write everything down, so that I always stop them. Hold on, I still do it. I do it for myself. I do it for my kids. I do all of that just so that you know it, because by the time you get to the car, you're done. You forget everything. Yeah.
Well, I know my daughter just had an incident with her dad was ended up in the emergency room, and they took him off a couple of medications and things, and they said he was down 20 pounds and da. And she asked for a copy of the file, and he was down 2 ounces in a year, not 20 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And so then they ended up putting him back in the medications again. And I mean, we all screw up. But you got to be on your toes, and it's okay to question. I know for my folks, like, they were not comfortable questioning the doctors. No. The doctors were God. And, my generation, I'll be 63 in a couple of months, and I have no problem, asking a question. None at all.
Absolutely.
And I have no problem with somebody saying that they don't know, but I'd like some follow-up. That's what's expected. Yep. That's what's expected from me in my job. Why would it not be for them?
Exactly. I totally agree with you. With you. Yep.
Time is just flying, but I do want to talk a little bit about grief, because there's so much about grief. But if there's one thing that you could point out that you think people kind of miss about when they're carrying on this journey about grief, what would that be?
That you're experiencing it. That it's part of caring, because I think the heaviness that everyone feels that you just can't shake and you can't quite put your finger on is grief. Anticipatory grief, it's ambiguous loss, it's flat out grief, and it's in many forms that your care partner has this disease or condition. That's grieving. They're changing. Your relationship with them is changing. The grief over what you're losing in your own life while you're caring. Like, we all have plans, right? Or we have thoughts, or we have an idea of what we want to do. That all changes when you start caregiving. The time that you lose is the time that you lose. And that's grief. I mean, my children are grown women now. They weren't when I first started caring back. And things change, and it's part of that. And people don't, Lori, let's be honest. People don't want to talk about grief when someone dies. They want you to feel better. They want you to get over it. They want you to, okay, it's better now. You're good. Better place, blah, 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 all that stuff. Nobody certainly wants to talk about it while you're in the midst of caring. And it's important to acknowledge that, so that you know that, yes, this is that heaviness that you feel. It's grief. And that's okay. Like, you're allowed to talk about that. But it's hard, and it adds another layer onto caregiving.
It really does. It really, really does. And I do think it's important to acknowledge the loss that you're feeling, but I also think it's really important, and this was something that I found for myself, that it was really important for me to realize that I couldn't have grief if I didn't care and if I didn't love first. And, the heavier it is, kind of the luckier you are in a lot of ways that you had that relationship to begin with. And so many people kind of go down the rabbit hole, and I think we all go down the rabbit hole, and we have to for a while, but you have to be able to pull yourself out too, and don't forget what you're thankful for, because there's a lot you'll learn during this journey too, and I think it's an opportunity to really grow your relationship, even though people look at it and go, the person's shrinking, they're fading away. But if you go with them, I found I learned to love unconditionally on levels I didn't even know existed, and appreciate the smaller things in life that really filled my heart. And big and flashy, I could care less about nowadays. I mean, it's really turned my life upside down in a good way.
Fully agree with you. It's the everyday moments. My father passed right before my 17th birthday. So I was fully aware that life can change in an instant, and that the people that you love and the people that are in your life will not always be in your life. And I carried that with me going forward all the time with my mother. My mother was my person. I mean, she was it for me. She was my world. And I knew that I was walking her home in this journey. I was fully aware of that from the beginning. And my goal was to care for her and not make her feel scared or worried. Like, I didn't want her to worry about anything, Lori. And I know that's very unreasonable, and I know that's a high bar to set for yourself. But that was my goal. I wanted to make everything as pleasant and as nice for her as I could, because I knew there would come a day when she wasn't going to be here. I didn't know, and I didn't spend the days with her thinking, oh, but you're going to leave me. I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking, I am enjoying these moments with you, and I'm going to make the best of this with you and for you, knowing full well when she left, it was going to be completely different, and I was going to be left with a completely different world, and I am, and I have been. But I had to acknowledge that, so that for me, it was like, oh, God, of course it's grief. It makes perfect sense. How could it not be grief? It goes along with that and statement. I can be grieving, and I can still enjoy where I am with my mother in this space. I'm not going to let it permeate and make me sad all the time. But I am going to acknowledge that it's part of this, and I'm going to acknowledge that this is a heavy load to carry. And I need to acknowledge that so that I can try to disperse that grief, if that makes sense.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it makes a lot of sense. And it's just such an interesting process, to go through. And so many people, like you said, don't want you to go. They don't want you to go through it. They want you to be done with it.
Yeah. Yep.
Just get over it. And it's. And you feel like you're on the clock anyway. Yeah. Yeah. And then it makes you feel less than, like, am I not normal? What's the deal? And we really have to understand, no, this is their problem. This is their discomfort. This is how they want to handle it, but you have a right to handle it however you see fit. And sometimes that's a hard thing to stand up to, because you want to fit in and you want to be over it. You want to get through it. It's painful, but everyone does it at a different pace, and that is perfectly acceptable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we just have about 5. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say we have about
I always say
5 minutes left.
5 minutes left. Okay.
So if there's anything else that you want to tell people, now's the time to do it. So that's all.
No, I mean, I would say as caregivers, everybody feels like they're in their own world doing this job, and that they're alone. And I think my battle cry is that you're not alone. You're not. And I know that you feel that you're alone, but you are not. There are plenty of us out here. And if you don't have the people in your life that can provide the support that you need, whatever that support is and whatever that support looks like, find those of us that are out here that can help. And there's no magic wand here, Lori, you know that. There's no, well, just do this and everything will be great. It's not. There isn't. It's amazing to me that there isn't some sort of help in that manner. A roadmap of some sort, and we can compile a roadmap, and that's the beauty of talking to other caregivers. At least there's something there that I've tried this, you can try this, or this and that. But when it comes to the emotional support, and you do need emotional support as a caregiver, you just do, because it's hard and it's heavy and it's lonely and it's isolating. There are people out here for you, and I know people may be afraid to reach out. People may say, I don't want to listen to other people's problems. I understand all of that. But if you simply allow yourself the opportunity, I think it will help just lighten your load a little bit. And that's really all, we're trying to do across the board is lighten people's loads and make them understand that they're not alone and they don't have to endure this alone.
Exactly.
So that's that's what I would say.
Let's give people your contact information. You're on Twitter at Rosanne, and that's. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Twitter at Rosanne Podcast. That's me on Twitter, and then Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. No, Facebook and Instagram. I am Daughterhood the Podcast, and I do man those sites. It's me that you're talking to. If you want to drop me a message or if you want to say hello, I would love to hear from you. And that is my social medias. Also at daughterhood.org if you want to find a Daughterhood circle in your area, or if there's not one in your area and you'd like to start one, you can do that too. That's daughterhood.org. And my podcast is also on the Daughterhood site under the podcast section.
Okay. And I have gotten 2 links from you. So I have like a podcast 1 and a podcast 2. And I'm not, one says Daughterhood the Podcast for Caregivers, and the other one is daughterhood.org, Daughterhood the Podcast. So I don't know.
Right. So
do those
the other site? Well, the 2 is on. It comes off of the Daughterhood site, the daughterhood.org site. I have a page there. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then what about I have a blog for you too, heyro.com.
Yeah. I started a blog just as me, as just me, as a caregiver. And that's my blog, heyro.com. So it's a lot, it's personal musings. And of late I've been writing about the podcast that I do release from a caregiver perspective as well.
Okay. Well, wonderful.
And you can visit me there too, because that's me too. So.
Okay. Well, great. Well, Rosanne, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. You can hear the passion in your voice, and I encourage people to check out our podcast and social media and connect. The more resources we have, the better off we all are. So don't worry about offending me. Sometimes I see that in support groups. People think, well, I can't go to another support group. And it's like, you can go to as many support groups as you need.
Yes.
Eat up the resources. Yes. They really will fill up your soul. And so don't deny yourself that. Don't deny yourself.
Yep.
Well, thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful week. And go ahead, Rosanne.
No, I was going to say, Lori, thank you for all you do, and thanks for the Dementia Map and everything that you do to support caregivers as well.
Great. Thank you. Have a great week, everyone. Bye now.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Hey everybody, Jared Sebesta here, host of Retire Repurposed. Now this podcast is about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. We believe retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.